So I assumed you already watched my video regarding Jesus' crucifixion and Ascension. And right now, this coming week is the 44th week, counting from the day of crucifixion, which is March 23rd, starting Monday the 18th to the 24th, the Sunday is the 44th week. I believe this is what they're counting from. Because this is the number 44 related to Jesus. From the day he crucified to the day he ascended back to heaven could be God's wrath will begin on the very day of the last day of the 44th week, which is the 24th, the Sunday, or right after the 44th week, the 25th, the Monday. As for the idiots, they always count from the day that is favorable to them, the middle of Jesus' death, the second day on the 25th of March, to the 20th is the beginning of the 44th week, which means the events to trigger the fall of USA and World War III. The end of the 44th week is the 26th, the official day introduced New World Order. Berlin is divided after World War II. Defeated Germany was divided into Soviet, American, British, and French zones of occupation. The city of Berlin, though technically part of the Soviet zone, was also split, with the Soviets taking the eastern part of the city. On the night of August 12 to 13, the Soviet Union soldier began to seal off all access between East and West Berlin. More than 100 miles of barbed wire slightly inside the East Berlin border. The wire was soon replaced by a 6-foot-high 96-mile-long wall of concrete blocks, complete with guard towers, machine gun posts, and searchlights. East German officers, known as Volkspolizei, patrolled the Berlin Wall day and night. Many Berlin residents on that first morning found themselves suddenly cut off from friends or family members in the other half of the city. Russian Revolution. In 1917, two revolutions swept through Russia, ending centuries of imperial rule and setting into motion political and social changes that would lead to the formation of the Soviet Union. While the two revolutionary events took place within a few short months, social unrest in Russia had been simmering for decades. Russia's loftened climate and a series of costly wars, starting with the Crimean War, meant frequent food shortages across the vast empire. Large protests by Russian workers against the monarchy led to the Bloody Sunday massacre of 1905. Hundreds of unarmed protesters were killed or wounded by the troops. The February Revolution. Julian calendar, February 23rd. Huge crowds of striking industrial workers. The protesters clashed with police but refused to leave the streets. On March 11, 311, the regiments opened fire, killing demonstrators, but the protesters kept to the streets as the troops began to waver. A provisional government formed on March 12, which is 312. If you shuffle the numbers, it's 123. A ritual number. On Julian calendar, October 24th to 25th, leftist revolutionaries launched a nearly bloodless coup d'etat against the Duma's provisional government. The Bolsheviks and their allies occupied government buildings and formed a new government. Russian Civil War. Civil war broke out in Russia in late 1917. The warring factions include red and white armies. Right now in US is red against blue. The Chinese Revolution. The first revolution was in 1911. Again, it's 911. From 1911 to 1926 was the period of the warlords, politicians with private armies who fought, shadowboxed, and bargained among themselves and with or against the central government. Various foreign governments had dealings with one warlord or other in search of someone who could be set up as the internationally recognized dictator of China, able to mortgage China's minerals and other resources in return for loans. Japan, on the other hand, pursued a calculated policy of always supporting more than one warlord, since Japan did not want a unified dictatorship any more than any other form of unity in China. At that time, the nationalist leader dealing with Soviet Russia, hoping to reform Chinese government. The Second Revolution united China. So in 1926, the army of the nationalists, under the leadership of Chiang Kai-shek, began to march north from Canton to unify all China. Ahead of them went an army of propagandists who roused the people against the warlords and in support of the nationalist ideals. However, as they advanced up the railway, the Japanese military forces in the province of Shandong obstructed their, provoking an army clash. In North China, there loomed the threat of war with Japan. There was also the threat of intervention by Britain and America, which did not wish to see a new government in China under communist and Russian influence. In these circumstances, Chiang Kai-shek felt that he could not afford to alienate either Britain and America or his own landlord and growing capitalist class, who had become armed by the growing left wing of the Kuomintang, the communists, students, and intellectuals who wanted to base their power on the peasants and workers of China. He therefore decided to break with Russia and to destroy the Chinese communists. The Russian advisors fled, many thousands of communists were killed, and the right wing of the Kuomintang, backed by the army, set up a government in Nanking. The struggle between the Chinese communists and the government lasted from 1928 to 1937. When a united front was formed to face the growing menace of Japan. Pre-revolutionary China was also disorganized and disunited, making it easy prey for imperialist nations like Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and Japan. These foreign powers established spheres of influence within China, exerting control and exploiting its people and resources. The Chinese Revolution was a revolution against many things, from imperialism in China, the Qing monarchy, suffrage and inequality, exploitation and corruption, national disunity, China's military economic weakness. French Revolution, the political and social upheaval in 18th century France has been studied by millions of people. The storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789 has become one of the defining moments of Western history, a perfect motif of a people in revolution. Historians have spent more than 2 centuries evaluating the French Revolution, trying to decide if it was a leap of progress or a descent into barbarism. By the late 18th century, the people of France had endured centuries of gross inequality and exploitation. The prevailing social hierarchy required the Third Estate, the nation's commoners, to perform its work while also shouldering the taxation burden. The king lived in virtual isolation at Versailles. His royal government absolutist in theory, but ineffectual in reality. The national treasury was almost empty, drained by mismanagement, inefficiency, corruption, profligate spending, and participation in foreign wars. By the late 1780s, the king's ministers were desperately seeking to implement physical reforms. Over the coming weeks, a wave of popular violence in Paris, in the countryside, and at Versailles itself hinted a bloodier revolution to come. Northern Ireland and the Troubles. Trouble had in fact been brewing in Northern Ireland for generations. Conquered by the English and divided in 1920, 911 again, Northern Ireland evolved into a self-governing member of the United Kingdom, but its population remained divided along political, economic, religious fault lines. On one side stood Unionists and Loyalists, Protestants who identified as British and were determined to maintain British sovereignty over Northern Ireland. On the other side were the Nationalists, a Catholic minority who had endured decades of political and economic discrimination. These sectarian divisions were a potent recipe for the conflict and disaster. The origins of the troubles can be traced back to civil rights movement of the mid to late 1960s, a push to obtain fair and equal treatment for Catholics. The first significant violence erupted in the city of Londonderry, known to locals as Derry, in 1969. Sectarian rioting in Derry quickly exploded into a fully fledged street war, dubbed the Battle of the Bogside. As the situation worsened, British troops were landed in Belfast to help keep order. The troubles took a turn for the worse in January 1972 after British paratroopers opened fire on protesters in Derry, killing 14 civilians. By mid-1972, Britain had suspended the Northern Ireland government and deployed 20,000 troops in the troubled region.